Hi, thank you all so much for joining us for our Oregon Safe Routes to School monthly webinar series. My name is Emily Dugan, and I'm a member of the ODOT Technical Assistance Provider Team, along with some folks at Alta Planning and Design, Cycle Oregon, and the Street Trust. Today, our monthly webinar series is about school streets. This is somewhat of a companion to our January webinar, which was about school circulation practices and how to improve getting students to and from school safely around drop-off and arrival times and dismissal times. So we'll be continuing that with a wonderful group of panelists from outside of Oregon as well, too, which is very exciting. And we'll be learning about school streets, which is a kind of natural next step to school circulation. Here's our agenda today. First, I'll give a very brief introduction to what a school street is. Our panelists are going to go into quite a bit more detail about that. So you'll be hearing from them on that. Then we'll be joined by our panelists for their presentations. Then we'll have time to go into a question and answer session. If you have questions during the presentations, please feel free to pop those in the chat and we'll get to them during that Q&A session. And then finally, we'll end with some resources and announcements for some great events that are coming up the next few months. To get us all on the same page on what a school street is, I just wanted to give this very brief definition. A school street is when a road outside of a school is either partially or completely shut down to traffic. Sometimes they'll allow through traffic for people that are trying to access their home in the neighborhood, but generally the road is completely shut down. This encourages families to walk, roll, or park and walk to school entrances instead of lining up in the cars and dropping off students individually. And really, this is a culmination of all aspects of Safe Routes to School. You have the infrastructure and engineering side of actually creating those barriers to block off the road. You have education and encouragement, and you're really bringing Safe Routes to School to life with this, with school streets. Obviously, there are many benefits for school streets. It reduces traffic congestion, which is great for everyone who's around the school during drop-off and pickup. It increases the safety for students who are walking and rolling to school during a drop-off and pickup. And also it encourages more interaction between school families. So school streets are this wonderful tool that you can use to promote safe routes to school in your communities. And now we're going to take some time to hear about some communities that are doing that. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce our panelists. First, we'll have Margot Ocañas and John Yee from Los Angeles. Margot is a supervising transportation director or planner at the Los Angeles Department of Transportation and launched and manages the city's Safe Routes to School program and has supported infrastructure, safety treatments, and street redesign projects totaling over $90 million, so quite a lot. Joining her is John Yee, who's the executive director of Los Angeles Walks, who's been a community organizer for over a decade and a half, and has experience fighting big tobacco, organizing parents around education justice, and representing his community of Koreatown in Los Angeles. Then next, we'll hear from Diane Walsh, who is a transportation planner for the Seattle Department of Transportation Safe Routes to School program, and is managing the School Streets program in Seattle, which is currently transitioning into a permanent program. And finally, we'll have Sean Meehan, who is a research project manager for the New Jersey Safe Routes to School Resource Center at the Alan M. Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers University. Sean focuses his work on active, sustainable transportation and working with multidisciplinary stakeholders and partners to help individuals and communities integrate healthy and physically active forms of transportation into their daily routines. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and move on to our presentation by Margot and John. Give me a second here to switch screens.
Certainly. So Emily, while you're getting that ready, again, many thanks to Emily and the team for allowing us to fly in from California to be a part of Oregon's presentation. It's lovely to be here this morning, and actually excited that I'll be very transparent up front that our pilot is not at the moment informing a permanent program. So I'm really excited actually to hear Diane's presentation about how their program is turning permanent. So in short, I will be using my time to really talk about some of the nuts and bolts about the planning and the logistics design and popping up school streets. And then my long-term, or I should say my longtime Safe Routes to School champion, John, will really focus on the programming and some of the key lessons learned. Next slide, please. So here is the existing condition of Westmoreland. This is a street in our East Hollywood area. And as you'll notice in the sort of the top photograph on the northwest corner is Dayton Heights Elementary School, and on the northeast corner is the Dayton Heights Early Education Center. Both of them have entrances on Westmoreland, as well as on Clinton, which is the parallel street. Not surprising, there are a few photographs there as well, is that this street is sort of impacted by people pulling into driveways, doing U-turns. We've got some commercial vehicles charging down the street during arrival and dismissal time, and just your basic front of school churn. So not what we would want to see as a school street. So next slide, please. Here is that same location, which has been obviously reclaimed for early morning recreation. So suddenly our space is coming alive with the noise of children playing and some music and our special guest visitors. Again, John will jump into that in more detail. So next slide, please. For a bit of context, Dayton Heights Elementary School is what we call a Safe Routes to School top 50 school with most need. So back when the city launched Safe Routes to School in 2014, we actually had to develop a prioritization methodology and a subsequent ranking of our 840 public schools within the city limits of Los Angeles, and have spent the past 4 years really focusing our planning and our non-infrastructure efforts at those top 50 schools. And in 2018, which seems a lifetime ago, we actually did our community-based walking safety assessment. And again, not surprising, we heard from that community that the front area drop off, as you can see where Westmoreland is, was really a significant area of churn. Another reason that Dayton Heights factors are floated to the top of the 840 schools is that it does have a fairly significant share of its population that does walk to school. So there were a couple reasons why we wanted to consider this location for a school street. So again, maybe some existing conditions for you to think about. For the elementary school, we had the advantage of both an entrance on Westmoreland, which we ultimately ended up closing, and we also had an entrance on Madison Avenue, so on the west side of the school, other backside of the property. And there was generally an informal valet or vehicle valet drop-off location. So we did work not only during our school street time to install the school street, but we also worked with the school administrators to really streamline and get that safety valet drop off running pretty smoothly. Not every parent was able to park and participate in the school street. So an important existing condition there. We also, the drop off for the Dayton Heights Early Education Center on the other side of Westmoreland, the drop off was actually on Clinton. So again, by closing Westmoreland, we were not impacting the drop off for the Early Education Center. I saw a quick comment pop up. A safety valet is a dedicated curbside lane that's established during the drop off and potentially the pickup time, when basically the parent driving the vehicle is forced into kind of an airport lane. We have staff on the curb that open the doors and allow the children to get out, close the door, and move them on. So it's just a more expedient way to move the vehicle traffic through in the morning. The third variable that worked well for this existing condition is that the Dayton Heights Elementary School actually took up the entire, what looks like the top side of Westmoreland Avenue. So by closing the school street between Clinton and Melrose, really we were limiting the impact to the residents who were only on the what looks like the south side of Westmoreland, because the school campus really consumed the entire side of the north side of Westmoreland. Okay, next slide, please. So from our perspective, I would suggest that there are probably three key elements that really helped us move expediently and generally successfully. And they're kind of in the family of 3 F's. So I'd say framing, foundational tools, and family. So one of the things that Safe Routes to School is learned through its working relationships with the school district or with the elected offices, or even when we're applying for grants, is that you got to frame what you're doing in light of citywide policy plans. So we were very cognizant about how a school street would meet Green New Deal measures, or it could help meet the district's clean air resolution metrics. We also, in large part due to the fact that we had 6 months to get the monies, design, and launch, we need to take care of sort of tap into foundations that we already had. So as I'll explain, our farmers market, because in many ways a school street is like a farmers market. You're closing a street, it pops up for a few hours, it goes away, that we just tapped all the standard engineering plan and the kind of materials that we use for farmers markets. We also, Safe Routes to School has done quite a few of urban tactilism. I'm sure I've screwed that up, but pop-up events. So we have a lot of those interim materials, particularly games and other materials for entertainment, as well as cones and movable materials. Next slide, please. And I think the other is really, probably most importantly, is what I'll call our family of partners. So in addition to myself with Safe Routes to School and John with Los Angeles Walks and our school district, which were really kind of the key administrators, we were heavily contingent on the support of our external partners. So the parent community at the elementary school, the early education center, even the local businesses, we wanted to make sure they were knowing and supporting of it, and our elected offices. Next slide. There's nothing like a deadline to get your elements in motion. So we were actually awarded a grant through NACDO. It was a $50,000 grant. We were notified in June, and we had to be up and running in September, October. Nothing like a deadline to make things happen. I actually would say that was one of the keys of success, is knowing that we had to implement quickly, and that again sort of forced electeds and other who can sometimes drag their feet to step up. Next slide, please. And kit of parts. So I really break these into 2 categories. One, when I say partner procure, this was very much Los Angeles Walks. Something that we found that we had to do, and it ended up being incredibly helpful, is that LA Walks, as opposed to our department, was the recipient of the funds. So NACDO wrote them a check, and the lovely advantage of that is that their procurement process is very streamlined. So when we needed to buy the folding gates at our entrances, to procure our banners, or for the stipends to pay the staff to assist, that was all administered by LA Walks, and we so completely bypassed what can be very cumbersome city bureaucracy. So while they managed the fiscal component, what we did on our side in the agency is really what I'll call in-kind contributions. So bend the arm of a designer to spend of time sort of making sure that the engineering plans work, having signage that we needed, some of it needed to be removed and fabricated and installed, ponying up some cones and getting some traffic officer support. It was sort of a beg, borrow, and plead a little bit of their time so that we could keep the monies on the LA Walk side. And next slide, please. Kind of coming from a marketing background, I've always come from a place of let's develop an identity. So we did create a logo, and then really tried to have attractive, legible, welcoming kind of graphics, not only from a dual language flyer, which was best put to use, as John will share, as real boots on the ground. We had LA Walks staff knocking on the doors of residents, collecting their cell phone numbers. We wanted to be in regular touch about how the world in front of their front door was going to be changing for 6 weeks. But being those boots on the ground, not only with the residents, but also with the school parent community that was coming and going, could not put a lot of trust on the school principals' communication through their existing channels. So we kind of had to be in the face of the parents to letting them know things are going to look different, and making sure that we were there pretty readily to answer a lot of questions in the days leading up to the launch of the school street and even during the school street. Okay, and then next slide, please. So just sort of summarizing our what I'll call specs and metrics, that sharing the sort of the size of the square footprint, or the square footage of the footprint of the school street. We were impacting about 18 parking spaces. We did not hear parking impacts actually rise to the top, which was nice to hear. Obviously, we had to procure some materials, again, many thanks to LA Walks, and removing some regulatory signs. And then lastly, just tracking our participation. So a lot of these specs and metrics were informed by our NACTO grant, who wanted some evaluative metrics. Next slide. And lastly, we had to work within 50,000. It's always interesting as a program manager to understand how much everybody else has to do their work for. It was kind of decided for us that this is what you're going to get, make it work. So we kind of backed out of it. Obviously, our heaviest expenses were on the communication and the engagement components, and the actual actualizing the pilot for the 6 weeks, in particular the stipend for the staff and our guest visitors, who were really making the school street come alive in the most meaningful of ways. So with that, I know I rushed through that, but I wanted to leave time for my partner, John, who's going to jump into some of the programming and lessons learned.
Thank you, Margot. All right, everyone, I'm going to go into a little more details about what happened on the ground. Let me just start with this, which is, I think, school treats, it's a pretty radical approach to safety. The idea that we're using playing kids on the street to slow traffic, not signs, not ballers, but children playing. And so I think that's what's really the most powerful thing about this work, is that it's kids that create safety. And I think that's a beautiful way to do it. So with that, so some of the things that we had on the ground, we had arts and crafts, really tangible things for kids to play with. So jumping rope, the chalk was super popular because kids could then draw on the ground, a hacky sack, having Jenga pieces. So whatever that can really bring the kids there and to play with, we try to put it and spread it out throughout sort of the closed area of the street for school streets. We also led physical activities. We put on those, like, you can see some of the costumes there with the stop sign, that's stoppy, and then the traffic signals. And so we had, Simon Says activities with the kids, exercise morning stretches with the kids, just to get them engaged. And what would often happen is parents would be standing on the sidewalk talking to other parents while the kids would go and play. And it became this really great community space where parents were already doing this, but now that there's an open space where you can do it, there's a lot more conversations happening. People were staying around longer after they drop their kids off. And so you really get this sense of community that you wouldn't have had this just been a street full of parked cars and then pick up drop off. Next slide. Beyond that, we also had games. I think I mentioned a few of them before. So these are some more pictures. I think what made this event really effective, though, is the community engagement component and the partners that we brought in. So let's just start with the vendors. We had the LA Public Library come in with their mobile unit. LA DOT, the Department of Transportation, came, set up a booth there. We even had private partners like Link, Super Pedestrian. These are tech companies that had like little scooters and those delivery e-bots. So bringing those kind of things into the spaces, I think are really important. And I think the most important was we partnered with the City Council office. I don't know how it is in most of your cities, but in LA, if you want to get any safe street infrastructure done, you have to get the blessing of your city council member. They have a lot of power over your streets. So this event became a really great opportunity to build that relationship between community and city council, which is incredibly helpful in the future for any kind of safe street needs. And I think this is where the key part comes in, which is that I think, and this is something that we as a staff were very intentional about when it came to outreach, was that we're not merely doing this for street activation, right? This isn't just a pop-up happening. We're doing this to sort of mobilize the community about a larger question at hand: is why are our streets so dangerous? Why is pickup drop-off so harrowing? Why is it such an awful experience? And so constantly having those conversations and pivoting to that, I think, is an important part of this experience, because we don't want people just to leave this saying, oh, that was great. So what? We want people to leave this saying that was great. How do we have more of this? And so important part of, again, of doing that is having those conversations when you're engaging the parents, when you're engaging people walking by, and again, when you're engaging elected officials and agencies who come and participate at this event. Beyond that, though, I would also say what Margot mentioned about we literally did, it was like a political campaign. We did multiple rounds of doors. We made sure we knocked on every door at least twice of all the homes and apartments on the neighboring streets, because as Margot says, your street is going to change and look drastically different. And so we want to make sure community members know. And so we did door-to-door canvassing, we flyer doors if no one answered, and we made sure, again, we knocked twice. Another key part is we hired local residents. If Johnny stands here and tells a parent, you can't park here, next week because we're doing an activation, it's totally different if your neighbor comes and says that to you. And so that's why having local neighbors, stakeholders who you pay, compensate for their hours, lead this effort, manage the closed streets, talk to the parents who walk there. When there's an angry parent, and we've had some of this, who come by and say, why is this happening? It's not me that should be interfacing. It should be another community member that should be interfacing, a community member that's paid. And so that kind of investment is essential for something like this. And you really prevent sort of the feeling that an outsider is coming in and changing our streets. It's the community members that are changing our streets. So I wanted to make sure I added that. Next slide. And this is just a few feedback that we got from the public. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not going to read this through, but we got a lot of great responses. I mean, parents and both students really reflected that they really value the space. They appreciate it. A lot of parents said they wish they had this. Yes, thank you. Paying neighbors for door-to-door engagement is brilliant. Yeah, I got to say, the practices that we use in politics, like when we campaign for elected official or for a ballot measure, those are the same tools and tactics we can use for campaigns like this. And so I really encourage y'all to do that. Next slide. And yeah, these are a few more comments that were made. And in preparation for today's meeting, I kind of thought to myself, like, what are some talking points that I wish I had armed beforehand? And there are two things I would bring up, which is when you're engaging the public, acknowledge the value of parking. Parking is precious, at least in LA, right? I can't speak on your cities, but parking is really rare in LA. And sometimes street parking is a harrowing experience. But at the same time, a lot of immigrant communities of color, their livelihood is made from their cars, at least in LA. And so acknowledging that is going to be important, especially when you're telling people that you're going to be taking away parking spots. And the second thing I would also add is acknowledge how awful pickup and drop off is. I haven't been to one single school pickup drop off where parents are having a good time. It's full of tension, anger, parents fighting with parents. And so I think acknowledging that is going to be an important part of engaging the community, because you want to make sure you understand where they're coming from. And so I would recommend that. And finally, I think I forgot to add this, sorry. The communities, I want to give you sort of the demographics of the communities we worked with, especially around this school, is primarily immigrant communities, Latino Asian families, a lot of monolingual families too. And so that's why the content that Margot shared earlier, it's all bilingual, because it has to be, right? There's no question about that. And the community also sits at the intersection of some major freeways and major roads in LA. So it's a high traffic, high commuter traffic neighborhood. And so I just want to give a little bit of context about that. I think that should be it on my end. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I kind of went over this, sorry. But yeah, individualized outreach, door-to-door, as I was mentioning, it's community managed. We made sure we hired community members and paid them. We didn't have a strong school leader, which was unfortunate. And so that's why we actually had to do canvassing, because we really couldn't pull into the support of the school. And I think Margot mentioned leveraging the CBO as a fiscal administrator for the funds, which was incredibly flexible on our end. So we're glad we were able to do that. And finally, I think the fact that Margot can navigate the city in a way that I can't, in a way that my staff can't, I think was what made this project successful. Had this just been an effort by LA Walks trying to push the city to do this project, it would have been far more difficult. So I think having an inside ally like Margot in your city is going to be crucial. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. There we go. Just hang with me for a second while I transition us over to Diane's slides. Thank you so much. And again, too, if you have questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll get to those during the Q&A portion. Perfect. There we go. And Diane, when you're ready.
Great, thank you so much. And it's so interesting to learn about how other cities are implementing their school streets programs too. Ours in Seattle is a little bit different, so I'm excited to talk about ours and how we're transitioning to a permanent program. So again, I work for the Safe Routes to School program. I'm actually relatively new. I used to work at SDOT in a different capacity, and I actually helped start the Play Streets program, which is sort of connected, similar in that it's a street closure for children. So I wasn't here during the implementation of the school street program, but I'm managing it now and helping make the transition to permanent. Next slide. Just to go over some goals from the Seattle Department of Transportation. Our mission is to deliver a transportation system that provides safe and affordable access to places and opportunities. And our vision is that Seattle is a thriving, equitable community powered by dependable transportation. And some of our core values and goals that also play into the School Streets program are equity, safety, mobility, sustainability, livability, and excellence. Next slide. So today I'll just be going over sort of the background, how the School Streets program came to be, what that means for Seattle, and then tell you a little bit about what we're doing moving forward. Next slide. So like I mentioned, oh, sorry. Yep, this is the right slide. The School Streets program really came out of the pandemic. So in 2021, SBS, our Seattle Public School System, opened up schools in the spring in person on a relatively short notice. So parents didn't have a lot of time to sort of figure out their plans for getting their kids to school. And then they also had 2 daily start and end times and no general education bus service. So this was a challenging sort of condition for a lot of parents to sort of think about how they're going to get their kids to school. We did have an existing permit for a fee that allowed timed street closures next to schools. But we were really thinking about how SDOT could support families in making it easier to walk and bike to school. And we already had a precedent. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Healthy Streets program, but we developed that in 2020, where we closed down sort of street segments along neighborhood greenways to traffic, so that only local access could sort of get through. So there was already a precedent similar to school streets that we could use. Next slide. So what do Seattle school streets look like? They are closures of 1 to 2 blocks adjacent to schools. So they have to be next to the school. They're open to families walking and biking. It's an opt-in program. So we did a lot of communication school-wide to let schools know that there was an opportunity to participate in the program, but really we let school leadership decide that they wanted to pursue the program itself. So that really changed how we did outreach to the communities because it was school-based to begin with. And then in the beginning, they operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, similar to our Stay Healthy Streets program. But now they operate 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So in this case, this school street at Whittier Elementary School decided to do 2 school streets on either side. Some decide to just do 1. And we have a traffic control plan that determines which kinds of barricades we use, depending on if it's adjacent to an arterial or whatever the street conditions are. Next slide, please. So program goals are similar to the goals of school streets in general. In the beginning, it was really to provide some social distancing space during COVID, kind of organize that chaotic drop off and pickup situation that John mentioned, reduce traffic congestion, obviously increase air quality by reducing the number of idling vehicles. And really, it is a chaotic situation where a lot of parents are sort of typically without a school street are running into children potentially. There's just a lot of chaos happening. So organizing that by increasing safety is a great way to get people out of their cars and allow them to walk safely to school, even if they're just parking a block away. And really a huge part of this for us was to encourage walking and biking. Next slide. In terms of what local access means for school streets in Seattle, it means that local residents along the street can get in, deliveries can also get in, delivery trucks, emergency vehicles can get in, and school district transportation can also get in. So we have a lot of school buses, we have other sort of mobility services for students with disabilities or special needs. So those are all able to still access the school directly, and they can navigate that safely through the school street. So who's not allowed any other vehicle through traffic, which is mostly parents in cars trying to deliver their children curbside to the school. Next slide. The location in Seattle, it's interesting that it's actually pretty well distributed because it is an opt-in program, but we have about 10 school streets in service right now. They're distributed throughout the city. They have to be on non-arterial streets, so that's one of the requirements. There can't be public bus route service, and you can't create a new dead end. So if there's a street sort of intersecting another street, and vehicles would have to sort of travel along that street and then make a turnaround, our traffic operations division decided that that wasn't a situation that we wanted to support. But they are revisiting that now, so we'll see if that's going to change in the future. And we also have one private school that's involved in our school streets program right now as well. Next slide. So in terms of the process, from the time that a school applies and expresses their interest to the implementation of the barricades, it's about 2 weeks time. So it's a pretty quick process because it's relatively hands-off for us at SDOT. So the school will apply, and they do this by submitting this form, this Microsoft form online. The principal has to sort of express their support. So it could be a principal applying, it could be a member of the PTA, a staff member, somebody else, but the principal really has to be on board, and we have to have some documentation of that. And then we sort of review the street that they've selected to make sure that it fits the design requirements and that it's a safe street to be selected for a school street. And then we actually have our engineers review it too, so that they can create a traffic control plan to determine which barricades and what are the placements of those barricades. And we have a third party that sets up those barricades. So all I have to do is make a phone call, and National Barricade will deliver the signs and barricades to the school and set them up. And the school actually does not touch them at all. They remain in place for the duration of the school year. And then in terms of our outreach, because the school has already expressed interest in being involved in the program, they have done sort of their due diligence within their school community, but we give them flyers so that they can also communicate with members of the public and distribute to their parents and other internal staff. And then we do a postcard mailing, letting adjacent neighbors a block or two out, depending on what the configuration of the streets are, to let them know that there is going to be a street closure that's coming. Thankfully, because we have the Stay Healthy Streets program, this is nothing new for a lot of Seattleites, so they're well aware that street closures could happen in residential streets all around the city. Next slide. So this is just a sample of what this is the flyer that we give them to hand out to their school community, but it sort of involves just the details on what a school street is and what we're trying to support. So moving into, next slide. Moving into the permanent program, we're sort of modeling that after the Stay Healthy Streets, which also transitioned recently last year into a permanent program. So we're working with 3 schools that we've selected because of their extra motivation and sort of community-based support for their school streets. One of them is a Title I school, but we just were interested in working with a few schools to begin with to figure out what their sort of permanent gateway features would include. But similar to the Stay Healthy Street, it includes, here we can just go to the next slide. It includes bollards, so some sort of concrete signifier or barrier, our own school street signage, and then art also inside the street. And then we also are going to give them the option to put out temporary barricades so that they can close the street more robustly, like a play street, if they want to do some sort of activity, bring in food trucks, have a community event, whatever it is. And then we really do want to maintain this 11-foot minimum clearance. So we're trying to narrow the street so that it's very clear that, that cars are not allowed through, but also to allow for school buses and other vehicles to get through. Next slide. This is an example of some street art that's been done in another community, in the High Point community. where students had a design competition to do some salmon in the street. So we're sort of using that as a model. It's just a lot easier to do things when there's already a precedent within the city. We don't have to push too hard, but this is an exciting way for students to sort of create, and schools to create some sort of sense of identity and allow their students to make their mark. So we're going to model our in-street art after this, maybe allow for something like intersection or crosswalk art, but the whole point of a school street sort of eliminates that need, since already that space is designated for walking and biking. Next slide. We're playing around with the different concrete barriers that we use. The middle picture is actually a precedent from Portland, where they use those sewer rings, which are paintable. So that's another way for schools to express themselves, and then mountable signs on top. A lot of schools are interested in doing something a little bit more fun and playful. So we're right now we're having a conversation with our engineers about which bollards would be appropriate to use in our school streets program. We're suggesting that schools don't use planters because of maintenance issues, especially during the summer months when schools are not in session and nobody's looking after the plants. But we're still putting that on the table as an option if we have really gung-ho schools who want to do some sort of planting and beautification. Next slide, please. So this is what our signage looks like now that's posted on the barricades. On the left here, the local access only for. And we're trying to update that a little bit. This is not our final sign by any means, but we're definitely going to have one of the standard street closed signs and then our own branded school street design that feels a little bit more playful, is a little bit more updated, and really emphasizes that the street is closed. We steered away from local access, like a very large local access sign, because it still implies that vehicles can get through. And we're trying to really support that the street is closed, but you may get through if you need to. Next slide. So finally, in terms of just the takeaways from the program, I think because it's a request, an opt-in only program, we haven't had to do a lot of the community outreach that other municipalities have, but it's worked pretty well for us. We have we have a lot of participation and there's more interest, especially now that we're moving towards a permanent program. We also have an SPS, so the Seattle Public Schools has a program coordinator for Safe Routes to School, and we're working with her, so she's able to do a lot of that communication up front and work in a hands-on way with schools who might not have the capacity to do something like a school street. So we're really blessed in that way. We like that the school identifies the street that they use most. They know their streets more than anyone. They know how their streets are being used. Some schools have used a school street kind of as a way to calm traffic and organize their drop-off pickup for cars. So we actually had to take away one of the school streets that was just implementing basically a one-way street. So we did have to manage that. But we do take on the liability for the street closures by having National Barricade come in, the third party, and manage the signs. So it's pretty hands-off for schools. And one thing that we're interested in, but we haven't really, we haven't done a lot of evaluation of is there really a mode shift that's happening? People claim that it feels safer, and people claim that they're walking and biking more, but we'd like to document that in some sort of way. So that's our next step. And that's the end of my slideshow.
Thank you so much. Very interesting to see a program coming into a permanent program. So thank you very much. And those bollards are really cute. The chat is going off about them. So.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sean, and I believe you're going to share your screen. So perfect. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. This has been great so far. Thanks for inviting me, Emily. Before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit more about our program in New Jersey. So the main pillar of the New Jersey program is the New Jersey Department of Transportation. They provide funding directly to schools and communities through the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant Program, and they support non-infrastructure programming through us at the Resource Center and funding for our transportation management associations who provide direct outreach throughout the state. So the Safe Routes Resource Center, where I work, assists public officials, transportation health professionals, and the general public in creating a safer and more accessible walking and bicycling environment through research, education, training, and dissemination of information about best practices and policy and design. So the Safe Routes to School regional coordinators are the local face of our statewide Safe Routes to School program. These coordinators are based in our transportation management associations. And I mentioned earlier, they cover the entire state. So wherever you are, there's someone to help you. So they offer free technical assistance for Safe Routes to School educational encouragement programs, events, and more. So I'm here today to talk about our school zone strategies project. So this is a little bit different. This is a project we did that kind of emphasizes on case studies. So similarly to what we just talked about, with schools reopening again after pandemic closures, there were a lot of concerns about increased traffic during arrival and departure due to more parents choosing to drive their children to school, avoiding school buses and carpools. And people were looking for something new. It seemed like I had a new audience willing to try something. So for this project, we sought out real examples from throughout New Jersey of inexpensive and flexible approaches to improving safety that prioritize children traveling on foot or bike. It was important for us to produce real case studies based on projects from within New Jersey to show people, hey, look, this other town did it, you can do it too. So I love having national examples, but I'm getting real tired of people telling me, well, that's California, we can't do that here. So to avoid that, which I hear way too often, and it's not true, by the way, you can do anything anywhere. By focusing on New Jersey examples, I was hoping to show people throughout the state that projects like satellite drop-off programs, temporary road closures, and temporary one-ways can and do work in New Jersey. So satellite drop-off programs redistribute congestion and pollution by encouraging parents to avoid releasing students directly at schools and instead to take advantage of an off-site drop-off location. From these locations, children then walk the rest of the way to school. So what I like about satellite drop-off programs is that they redistribute traffic over a wider area and reduce conflict points for vehicles and pedestrians and bicyclists. They also help to limit indoor air pollution at schools by moving traffic further away. They can also involve the entire community. So if someone lives too far away to walk, or if there's a safety barrier that prevents them from walking, the satellite drop-off program can still involve them. They can go to the drop-off location and then walk the rest of the way to school and get some beneficial exercise. So our satellite drop-off case study is the Drop and Go program from New Providence, New Jersey. This program was started due to traffic concerns, as I'm sure isn't a surprise to anyone. Parents reported that they often sat in traffic for 45 minutes before arriving at the school to drop their kids off. Many of the parents also admitted that they waited until after 8:30 a.m. to avoid long waits. So to avoid these waits, they made their children late to school every single day. So an early proposal focused on providing more room for vehicles by increasing parking lot and blacktop space at the school. Two local parents who didn't want to see more pavement at the school got together to create an alternative suggestion that turned into the Drop and Go program. So the program was designed to be informal and seen as a choice with benefits rather than a regulation. There are multiple drop and go locations per school, often located at designated crossing guard locations and never more than a quarter mile away from the school. The program operates year-round and information, including drop and go locations, is available on a website. So what have the results been? Parents have been extremely supportive of this program, and it's actually led to increased support for other local Safe Routes to School initiatives. The program has resulted in a much more orderly and less chaotic arrival and departure. Through the program, students and their parents have also reported that they've gotten to know their crossing guards better, and the parents said that they're reassured about their child walking or bicycling even further distances, knowing that the guards that they've already gotten to know are looking out for their children. So walking and bicycling to school has become part of the community culture in New Providence, and after the success at the first school, the program has spread to other schools within the community as well. So our second school zone strategy is temporary street closures. Temporary street closures use a physical barrier to restrict vehicles from critical streets during arrival and departure. So this also helps to reduce congestion and it minimizes the conflict points, and it frees up more space, as we've heard from some of the other presenters, in front of the school zones for students walking and biking, for play, taking the car away from, taking the space, away from the cars and giving it back to the children. So our case study for temporary street closures is 3rd Street in Fairhaven, New Jersey. This street closure is actually a long-standing program. It was established by ordinance 20 years ago. So 3rd Street is a key corridor in Fairhaven. It connects each side of town and it connects both of the schools in the borough together as well. So this key corridor is a great way to provide a traffic-free environment for children to travel to and from school. So police and crossing guards close 3rd Street to traffic each morning and afternoon. Walking and bicycling to school is promoted as the preferred mode of travel to school. This can be seen through the annual celebration of what they locally call Transition Day. Each year, the community celebrates as 3rd graders at Sickle School prepare to become 4th graders at Knollwood School. As part of this event, current 4th graders at Knollwood School ride their bikes to Sickle School to greet the 3rd graders and ride back to Knollwood School with them to welcome them to their new school and to prepare them for orientation. Along the way, parents and other community members cheer and congratulate the students as they transition to their new school. So I had to take this picture of the bike racks at the Sickle School when I was there for Transition Day one day, because it's the most amount of bikes I've ever seen at an elementary school in my life. It was really amazing to witness. So bicycling to school has really become the expectation of the community. So while Transition Day is a fun event, parents also love that it helps to ease anxiety about switching schools and helps to get their children excited for the next school year. So having this fun event really inspires these children to keep riding their bikes to school. So residents support the street closure program and are familiar with the road closure and are willing to take a different route to help keep local children safe. This is seen as a very important project locally. Residents have also cited that the bicycling culture was a deciding factor in choosing Fairhaven as a place to raise their family. So my next safety strategy is temporary one-way streets. So with a temporary one-way street, vehicle movements are restricted but not eliminated near a school. Sometimes a full closure won't work, but these temporary one-way streets can be a way to still make an impact without fully closing the road. So they make arrival and departure more directed and more predictable, and they also help to minimize conflict points by having vehicles travel in a more orderly manner. So our case study for temporary one-way street is Cherry Street in Bound Brook, New Jersey. When a new principal started at Smalley School, he found the arrival and dismissal process really worrying. He was very concerned for student safety as he witnessed parents triple parking and letting students off in the middle of the street. It also appeared to him that the buses dropped kids and picked them up kind of randomly. There was really no order to what he saw. So the principal reached out to the police department and also his local Transportation Management Association to discuss his concerns and come up with ideas. Working together, they decided to try the one-way street. So during arrival and dismissal, Cherry Avenue is limited to one-way travel. Parents who are dropping off students must do so in a designated space along the school side curb. Parking in front of the school and making a U-turn are both prohibited. No parking signage and new striping have been added to the school's front. Designated bus drop-off locations are delineated with signage and paint markings, and accessible parking spots have been added along the roadway in front of the school to facilitate better ADA access. They've also closed the parking lot and it's only available to staff. The changes to Cherry Avenue have resulted in, again, a more orderly and consistent environment during arrival and departure. There are fewer delays for parents who are dropping off, fewer idling vehicles, which is better for everyone's health, and safer conditions for students as they exit and enter vehicles. With these reduced conflict points and more orderly travel, conditions are also better for students who walk and bike. With the success at Smalley School, similar efforts have been started at other schools in Bound Brook as well. So for me, the best part about putting these case studies together was having the opportunity to speak with the people who put these programs together. I was sure to end my interviews by asking them about their lessons learned and their keys to success. Here are some of the things I heard. So most of them mentioned to involve parents in the community as much as possible. So people don't like mandates. Programs that are presented as options with benefits tend to be more successful. Involving people from the beginning helps to promote ownership of the program. All of the strategies I've discussed are also pretty low cost. So the people I spoke with recommended on focusing on these low cost solutions, and that having the solutions be so low cost is a great way to help convince others to give it a try. With low cost, it's hard to say no. Two of the organizers I spoke with recommended what they call the golden retriever method. They say too many people show up to public meetings as attack dogs, and their messages get lost along the way. The golden retriever method also involves having a strong point of view, but instead of approaching in anger, approaching leaders prepared with a potential solution and a positive attitude. While this isn't a new concept, I love the term golden retriever method, and it's something I keep in mind as I'm talking to people. You know, I vision that friendly golden retriever, and that's the way we need to be to bring people to our side. So these same two organizers also recommended that people make sure to build upon successes. These volunteers had already run walk to school day programs and had a good reputation for helping their community. They felt that their past experiences and efforts led to an increased level of trust and acceptance when proposing a brand new project in the community. So they were able to, you know, take the faith they had already earned and turn it into something bigger. So the biggest piece of advice they had is to reach out to those who can help. So our TMA, Safe Routes to School regional coordinators, were involved in planning many of the case studies highlighted in our report. So, you know, their advice was to be sure to reach out to folks that can help, like the people at Commute Options, to pick their brains, discuss issues, and see how they can help you to improve your community. So that's it for me. There's my contact information and our New Jersey Safe Routes Resource Center website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. Definitely echo, yes, reaching out to local partners and groups is amazing, and glad to be a part of that. We have about 8 minutes left, and so I'm going to open it up actually to the group to see if there are questions. I saw that in the chat. There looks like there was some great discussions happening. So going to open it up now to see if anyone has questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to just pop it in the chat, whichever is more comfortable for you. And if no one has a question, I've got one to start us off. Okay, so I was just wondering how, for the three of you or four of you, how would you recommend including students or families who may have to take the bus or be dropped off to engage in some of these fun activities? I mean, especially to in LA, it looks like there was a lot of opportunity for students to engage in the artwork, to do have that fun time before and after school. So what advice would you give to communities to be sure that all students are getting involved in these school street programs, even if they're taking the bus or being dropped off?
I'll just jump in quickly, and John, you can either elaborate, or Diane, feel free to jump in. As I shared, there are sets of parents that just have to drop off using the vehicle. So our goal had been to do enough awareness building prior to the start of the school street to encourage people, although this is difficult to do, is could you arrive 5 to 10 minutes earlier or drop your child earlier, knowing that the school street is available and that they could cross campus and participate in the school street. I'll be terribly transparent, and John mentioned this as well. Our goal had been to sort of do a bottoms up approach to a school street. We had a good working relationship with the principal during the Safe Routes to School planning process. When we first pitched the school street to her, she was very enthusiastic, and I'm not sure what happened, but she went MIA on us. So suddenly our school communication channels just went dark. So the hope had been that we could communicate that even if you arrive on campus, you could walk across campus and participate in the school street. Part of it's just pure building awareness.
Yeah, I agree with Margot. I would, yeah, in addition to like make sure you do all the right stuff, notifying the community, going through the school, going door to door, flyering, and just letting people know. I think another part is if it is just incentivizing people, like letting them know that there's going to be a vendor there giving out free books, like we had the LA Public Library mobile van one time. That there's going to be resources there from the local agencies. If you want to talk to your city council member, their staff is going to be there. And so really giving reasons for people to come beyond just play for the kids, and just incentivizing the parents as well. So those are some tips that I would give.
I really love that LA has like such robust programming. It feels like a really wonderful use of the space. We don't really do that in Seattle, but we encourage it. So I would just say that, especially as we transition into this permanent program, having input from all community members, all aspects of the school community, to really engage in the artwork that we're sort of implementing, and then reclaiming the space during the school day too, for a lot of teachers to use the space to shut it down completely as a play street, and include those students in the programming. Also shut down for parent night outs, that sort of thing. That's sort of how we're encouraging other folks to be involved.
So I would just add that like the drop and go program that I mentioned, part of that design was to encourage people who really do live too far away. So it might not, I understand it might not work in every geography, but if you can get those offsite drop-off locations, it makes even the kids who do get dropped off walk part of the way, and they're part of the program. And, they arrive able to participate in whatever activities you have going on.
And
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yes, Sean, we have quite a few folks that work in rural areas in Oregon. So those kinds of programming, that's super helpful to hear about. But go ahead, John.
I wanted to add just a reality of this too, which is that some people won't get out of their cars. Fact check, right? Because it's still freaking dangerous to walk to school. Even though you clawed off that one street, one block, you're not changing everything else that happens around that one block. And so I think even acknowledging that some parents still will refuse to get out of their cars, and that is okay. That's just the reality and the streets that we work with.
I'm going to check if there's any questions from the group, from the audience. Oh, I see a hand raised. Go ahead and unmute your, oh, Lale, thank you.
Hi, thanks for sharing. And I'm wondering if you all could talk a little bit about what you're planning for evaluation.
I'd love to hear from other folks too, because we're not really doing much in the way of evaluation, and we really should be. That was sort of something that fell off just during the pandemic, I guess. And maybe there's an opportunity now before we really launch this permanent program, but I would love to hear what other folks are doing.
Well, I can chime in just at a very high level. Again, we were really just we had to move quickly, and it was a 6-week installation, and we had to sort of shut it down. The hope had been that we could potentially inform a citywide program. We were running into staff capacity and some funding issues, so we did not. But I think from a metrics perspective, and John touched on, I think everybody's aware. I also want to be really clear. And again, Diane, you might have some interesting insights, but closing the street for that time, there are ripple effects to the traffic around that street. So there were definitely some wrinkles in those first weeks of the vehicular traffic trying to figure out what was going on. You can outreach till you're blue in the face, but invariably a lot of people are not going to know. Parents were confused, even though we had flyered like crazy. The reason I give you that context, that I think some of the metrics that would be helpful is I don't know how you do this quantitatively, but qualitative, to basically show that the whole goal is to organize and streamline and make that neighborhood fabric calmer, and operate more smoothly, such that people inherently do feel comfortable enough so that they might consider getting out of their car. So I think it's a combination of looking at traffic pattern and traffic flows, perhaps traffic volumes that go through a safety valet, to doing in-classroom polling over time, to sort of do travel tally reports to see if kids have made a decision about whether they're participating in a school street and or opting to walk or bicycle. But you're going to have to give it some time, because there's definitely a reconfiguration of the energy that doesn't start off so nicely, but potentially could. And you'd want your metrics to be able to reflect that.
And something that I wish, like, this is why I wish we had the buy-in of the school, because I think that would make these changes and a longer impact last longer, because it's baked into some institution beyond LA Walks and Safe Routes to School, right? And unfortunately, I think the closest thing we had to a local institution with this kind of these learnings, these experiences baked into were the community volunteers that we paid to sort of do this, to manage the event for the 6 weeks. But if we had like a PTA, if we had like already pre-built parent organization, then these learnings would be baked in there and could be reflected and used for future activities, for future, that maybe they could seek funding themselves. And so that's one thing that I thought was like a missed opportunity on our part, that we could maybe, that I would recommend if y'all do this, like, is there a group of parents or a group of people that can hold this, hold the evaluation, hold that data, and be able to create a better program in the future, or use past experiences to advocate for a program in the future?
Oh, I do want to just add that we are going to try to do some air quality measurements. That's a really great way to support the program in the future.
Thank you all. Sorry, we are just about at time here, so I'm having to cut our panel portion a little bit short here. But I did just want to thank again to our speakers for joining us and sharing your expertise and information. I'll send out their presentations with their contact information as well too. So attendees, if you have more questions, please, if you're all comfortable with it, with people emailing you with those questions, I will share that. Sorry, we're over time here a bit, but just a few quick announcements. Our next webinar is going to be on crossing guards, and that will be March 21st from 11 to 12. Signups and registration are coming for that soon. The Oregon Active Transportation Summit is April 23rd to 25th. If you are able to register sooner, the better, because there's the early bird rate right now. Our Safe Routes to School ODOT annual meeting is going to be that during the Oregon Active Transportation Summit on April 26th from 10 a.m. to noon. Details will be coming soon. And then after that annual meeting, we'll be holding a pedestrian safety training from 1 to 3. And finally, our March hub meetings are going to be focusing on data collection and evaluation of safe routes generally. But it's great. That question on evaluation kind of matches really nicely with that last announcement. So with that, thank you all so much. Thank you again to our speakers. Again, apologies for cutting the panel discussion short, but if you have questions, you can contact them. All right. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a great afternoon.